Welcome to the Pacesetter Pod, where we explore and reveal the perspectives, insights, and approaches to deliver great results and growth in your agribusiness through better execution. Here's your host, the Integration Pacesetter, Joe Mosier.
Welcome, Pacesetters of Agribusiness, to another episode of the Pacesetter Pod. I'm your host, Joe Mosier. Thanks for tuning in today. Hey, a real quick reminder before today's episode. If you haven't done so already, now is the perfect time to subscribe to this podcast. You can do it on your device right now as you're listening. It's the best way to ensure that you never miss any of the content or conversations that we publish here each week, all in service of helping you get better results in your agribusiness through better strategy execution. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with Brad Fruth, who's the Director of Innovation at Beck's Hybrids. Now, most of you are familiar with Beck's, but a couple of high notes. They are more than 85 years old, and Beck's is the third largest seed brand in the United States and the largest family-owned retail seed company in the country. They are dedicated to serving farmers throughout the Midwest and the Mid-South, and they focus all their efforts under one mission and vision for the organization, helping farmers succeed. Now, Brad is an interesting guest to have on. He spent most of his career actually in the IT space, 20 plus years with Beck's overall, and in early 2020 made a big jump to take on the challenge of leading innovation across the organization. And so in our conversation, we're going to talk about innovation at Beck's. We're going to talk about his learnings and talk about what's working and also what we can maybe share with others that are also on a similar journey. We'll cover things like how do you balance the traditional approaches of being solely internally focused and driving innovation within an organization versus some folks that take the tact of being externally focused, and really kind of how they've looked at bridging the two to kind of drive their innovation and their strategy forward. We'll talk about the role of innovation as the messy middleware that connects farm income and successful farmers, which is the ultimate objective, with identifying and adopting additive technology. That technology being whether it's agronomic products and services in the field or a digital product and solution that's sitting on a server. Brad's going to reflect upon some of the biggest reflections of success of innovation being not just the financial results you deliver or the partnerships you create, but the people you meet and the relationships that you build. And that sounds kind of loose and pie in the sky, but he's going to really talk about some real practical examples of where relationships have actually created value over time. And so that kind of taking a broad, expansive lens of innovation in the many different ways it can be accretive to your balance sheet, to your business, and to your customers. And then Brad's going to close us out with the one thing that he looks for in startup companies that are potential partners, potential suppliers to Beck's, the one thing that you cannot fake and the one thing you cannot help to build a successful company without. And I think you'll really enjoy that topic. Now, just a brief mention, I was having some audio issues here in this week's episode. And so while Brad's going to come through crystal clear, mine's a little bit less than optimal. You'll still be able to understand me. You'll be able to hear me. But I just want to call that out and thank you for your patience as we work through those issues. And also thank you for being a part of the Pacesetter Pod community, for being a listener, and for being a leader in agribusiness who's willing to tune in and engage and take a wide lens in thinking about how to improve strategy execution in your organization. We appreciate what you do. So with that, here's my conversation with Brad Fruth of Beck's Hybrids. Brad, welcome to the Pacesetter Pod.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me today.
Excited that you're here. Let's jump right in. You have a very interesting role at Beck's Hybrids as relates to innovation. And I really want to spend some time talking about innovation at Beck's, innovation in agribusiness. What does it mean to lead innovation within an organization today? And in service of that, maybe let's just jump in first right out of the gates with what does innovation mean at Beck's, both in terms of an operating definition, a sort of tabletop definition, and then how this shows up in the areas you choose to focus or how it might be structured within the organization.
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. I mean, most folks start out with kind of the question of, so you're director of innovation, what exactly is it that you do every day? And when I took this role almost 6 years ago, it's something that we've had to define for ourselves and has moved kind of over time. So when we started the innovation group, the whole kind of premise was, we're in a growing and scaling company. Doing new things are difficult as you're growing and scaling and not always having more resources. And so how do we create white space for our department managers to evaluate and implement what we would call disruptive change. What we are not is we saw some other groups that might have innovation groups where the culture within their business is so static or so rigid that it's very difficult to innovate, especially when you want to do something from the ground up. So the whole view and the whole goals of creating an innovation department here at Beck's was, how do we foster that and create that kind of environment there? So the first thing that I am is, our group are basically internal consultants. And so how can we help them, again, evaluate and implement disruptive change? What it is not is a rigid process. And so, at Beck's, we're a family-owned independent company. And so, rigid process and bureaucracy is not something that is encouraged here. So what I found is that different department managers want to interact with us in different ways, and that's all fine, right? Some just want, as I say, like a shoulder to cry on or somebody to punch in the face. That's perfectly fine. Some want help with the ideation and implementation, like, how in the world am I going to do this? Some just want help with maybe how do I present this to leadership? And some department managers don't give me the time of day. And all that is perfectly acceptable within our model. So that's the original kind of nexus. What we also found is that when we started doing that, is that there were a lot of startup companies that were knocking on our door at Beck's Hybrids and saying, hey, I want to be in your testing, or I want to look at a way that I can access your dealer network, or, I want to do XYZ. And, a lot of them are Facebook stalking folks, or trying to navigate, LinkedIn, or meet somebody at an after hours party. And so what we kind of also said is, one of the things the innovation group needs to do is to be very public and to be that front door. And I often tell them, like, it's our job to be kind of a concierge for you. And so, we meet with a lot of folks that think that they want to interact with Beck's Hybrids. We kind of explain maybe the different pathways. I mean, let's just take agronomic testing. There are 4 or 5 different ways that we do agronomic testing. And so while some of the things that we do are very public, that might not be the right fit for you. So, really trying to help walk them through what are the best ways to interact with Beck's Hybrids. So, and then thirdly, the last thing is, more of maybe the traditional, like, skunkworks stuff. So, how is a family-owned company going to be competitive in the future? So we get to look at what the future looks like at Beck's. If anybody's been at a talk or a field show, or heard Sonny or Scott or any of the family talk, you'll hear this message around, our primary goal here at Beck's Hybrids is to help farmers succeed. We do that today through seed, and we're always looking at new opportunities of ways that we could get involved in other things. So that's kind of the third thing that we get to do. And often I tell people it's because of those 3 things of why I have the best job here at Beck's Hybrids.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for folks that maybe, I'm guessing the majority of folks have heard the term skunkworks before, but I believe that was a term that came out of Boeing post World War II, I believe 50s or 60s, and it's sort of a sort of hidden or loosely hidden, walled off, separate effort within a large incumbent to basically build and bet on the future. Or maybe you have a better definition.
Right. Yeah. Well, so you bring up a great point there. When we started this group, there was some tension with our research group because, when they kind of said, hey, we want to do this innovation role, our R&D guys were like, hey, wait a minute. Our job is to build new products and services and things for Beck's. And so as we kind of work through that, the best way that we kind of have separated some things internally is, like, our R&D group is pre-commercial. Like, that is 1 to 5 years, right? What I would call, like, maybe skunkworks or exploratory stuff, like, we're looking at new business lines. We're looking at how do we maybe work outside of seed, or, especially when you're dealing with some of the trait startup companies, those are going to take 5, 7, 9 years. Mm-hmm. And so we want our R&D team to be more focused on short term, while we get to kind of look out longer term there. I would also say, like, your R&D spend, every company has to decide how are you going to spend your R&D money. And so, that R&D spend is, again, on direct product access. We have a little pile of money that we can use on more riskier things, that if something blows up or we go down a certain path, we've been doing some exploring around some dairy work. And if it works, great. If not, we're not losing the whole farm. So that's how we've kind of split it up into maybe the R&D pre-commercial folks that are very good at what they do. I'm an IT guy by trade. I have no idea how traits and genetics, that's a whole nother group. But we maybe do some exploring around, hey, let's maybe run a pilot here or a pilot there or partner with a company just to see if there's something there that could potentially be brought to market later.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. The idea of the pre-commercial 1 to 5 year runway versus the longer term, I think it's probably helpful also in chalking the field and reducing, if not eliminating, some of that tension that is inherent between innovation and R&D efforts.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there aren't days that the research guys want to see me dead, but that's the healthy tension that we have, right? Is that we're both pushing each other to be better. And we do a bunch of work with them too, right? Of like, hey, I need somebody more scientific to come in and help as somebody's talking about traits and genetics and DNA and splitting this and putting this with this. It's like, hey, I'm in over my head. So we have a very collaborative environment. We love working with them, but that's kind of how we've divvied out some of the roles.
Yeah. Well, we'll skip past the fact that you've both referred to people wanting to punch you in the face and other people wanting you dead here in the first 8 minutes of the interview. We'll check in on how safe you're feeling later.
There you go.
So what's something interesting you mentioned here that I find interesting is this internal. So in the first 2 pillars, the internal consultancy type role, and the second being sort of an external engagement with the startup ecosystem, startup organizations, being a concierge level of support to them and how they might partner with Beck's. In my conversations I've had with other people in the industry, with folks we've had on this show, we sometimes see it cut one way or the other, where an internal innovation department could be somewhat divorced from the existing business and they're looking exclusively to the external marketplace. Or they might be wholly supported on advocating for, if not incenting or pushing internal management towards innovation practices. Have you found, I don't want to presume here, but my guess is that by being the shoulder to cry on, the throat to choke, the face to punch, whatever it might be as an internal consultant, while also hearing what the market is saying it needs, that's probably creating a feedback loop that goes both ways. That's additive, or do you find they're actually 2 completely separated, bifurcated focus areas for you all?
Yeah. So at Beck's Hybrids, our organization is very service focused. I mean, we are a customer service organization that has good product and a price leader. So that's how we kind of view ourselves. So we have this inherent trust that we've built with our customers over a long period of time. Customers are very honest with us on what that feedback is. To your point, what we find is missing is that kind of middleware layer of, to your point, what's happening at the farm gate, what is actually driving net farm income, what are those value added things that are needed, versus what technology is actually making an impact and is real and I can buy today. Those are 2 very, very separate things. And, you can spend days reading, there's been a lot of ink spilled here recently on ag tech and ag tech investing and, what's good and what's bad. And at the end of the day, what we have found is that, number one, I do not directly invest in any of these companies. What we found is that the niche that we're kind of filling is that startups want to know, what are those problems that I can solve? What are those pathways to market? Can you help bring some legitimacy to my product in the farm gate? That's definitely one thing. 2 is that instead of competing with people that have money and startups and or with VCs rather, and private equity, what we've said is, hey, let's become friends on that side too. And let me learn about what are the things that you would like to invest in. And let me help you introduce you to people that we think are going to make a difference at the farm gate. So when I first started this role, I thought it was a handicap that I didn't have maybe an investment arm here at Beck's. And I've actually found that it's been amazing because we can do a lot with other people's money. And what I mean by that is that I can make a recommendation and that recommendation carries quite a bit of weight with the VC, because I'm like, look, I'm either adopting this practice or I'm trying to embed them into one of my value adds here at Beck's Hybrids. And I don't want to invest. I want to give them money and be a customer. And so that's some of the maybe middleware or messy middle that we play in there. And that's oftentimes what's missing on both sides of the fence. This is an unpopular opinion with some of my friends, but I believe that there's plenty of money out there for people that are making a difference at the farm gate. The question is, how do you help that marriage and bring some legitimacy to the conversation? Now, we have a biased point of view, right? I'm not saying that we know everything. I'm saying that as a independent seed company that offers choices and value-added products to farmers, here's what we think is moving the needle there. So where we try to be very open with our bias and and label them. And then if somebody wants advice, we'll definitely give it.
Let's talk a little bit about this investment approach then, to kind of build upon what you're saying, which you thought was a handicap, not having your own investment
Yeah.
arm. I'm going to guess that most of our listeners and listener organizations are, I'm not guessing, in fact, I know that most of our listeners represent organizations that are not of a size or scale that they would have a corporate VC model or corporate
Right.
venture capital model. Beck's, however, probably is at the level where you could have some level of a quote unquote corporate VC structure in place. You guys made the explicit decision not to go the corporate venture capital route. It'd be helpful, Brad, if maybe one, do you want to give us a definition of what corporate venture capital or CVC is for folks that may not be familiar with it? But even more importantly, how Beck's arrived at the decision that you did not to make those direct investments, but rather to use your positioning and your strategy to legitimize and provide credibility to solutions and then partner rather than doing a capital infusion for equity. You're actually giving them money as a customer.
Sure. So what I would call a traditional CVC, is where a company will stand up a venture capital arm, and then they will seek to make investments into companies that they think are going to, help them either bring new products or services to the market and give them a financial return. When we looked at that, the challenge at Beck's Hybrids is that, we're a growing and scaling company, right? Even though we're 85 years old, we are still growing 10 to 12% every single year.
Mhm.
So the competition for capital within Beck's Hybrids is the same as a startup company, right? And so it's no different than any growing business. So when we looked at that, if I'm going to ask our board and our leadership here at Beck's to write a check to just put money into another company, it has to beat our internal rate of return. It also has to beat our traditional land assets. Beck's is a land-based company, so land is a part of our asset portfolio. And in order to do that, to be quite honest, the venture return, there's no way that you're going to be able to do that. And so, again, when we looked at the marketplace and said, we also have no experience doing that, right? I have no experience negotiating a term sheet, doing valuations of businesses, all those things that VCs do every single day. At the end of the day, what I had to do though is look at what are we really good at, and that is oftentimes, I think it sounds so simple, but like knowing what your strategic capability in the marketplace is and what you're good at. Sonny tells us all the time, find what you're good at and do more of that. Right? Like, so when I look at Beck's Hybrids, like we are a customer service, farmer first organization. That is what we are really, really good at. Now, we also have a large production farm here at Beck's. So I have a large playground with a bunch of agronomists that we can have fun and test new things. And we have a lot of friends in the VC world that are asking, what should I put my money into? So when we looked at that landscape, I'm like, why in the world would I show up with a checkbook that's this small and has this rate of return that I'm fairly certain I can't really achieve? And why don't I just go to some friends that I've met in VC and say, hey, you know what? Here are some groups that we think are going to make a huge difference at the farm gate. And if I were to invest, I would maybe do due diligence on XYZ. That's how we kind of arrived at that. And I think it's worked for us really, really well. Venture returns, that is a investment portfolio that you have to be comfortable with. And I have some friends that work for Alloy Partners here, and Elliot Parker has a great book out there where he talks about innovation competing with a balance sheet is very, very, very difficult. And so it is very hard to do raw innovation where you know that there's going to be a time where you're going to bleed cash and returns are going to be tough. And so it is very difficult to do innovation, quote, off of the balance sheet. So we just kind of said, we don't want to play that game. And so what are we good at? How can we make a difference? And what is the missing product in that marketplace? And so that's how we found this kind of sweet spot. So the question that I often get from startups then, well, if you don't have money, like what in the world, why in the world would I talk to you? And it's really those two reasons of, well, we run a large farm here at Beck's as well. So I want to be a customer, or I have 6 value adds that I want to enhance. So I want to enter into a sales agreement for things that we think could enhance our business or make a difference in our farm.
And I would imagine too, this is going to create decisions whereby they're less speculative in nature, because it's if for you to enter into that agreement, that arrangement, becoming a customer, you've seen something that's indicative of value add to you and your strategy in the near term, and it's not like you said this bet on the future with
Yeah.
VC odds that may or may not pay out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a weird relationship, in my opinion, of the CVC world of, hey, I'm going to give you a bunch of money and sit on your cap table and probably take a board seat and tell you what to do, but yet you're supposed to be a separate company. And so it's like, it's just a weird relationship for us. Whereas if you're in a customer relationship, like, you have to solve my problems. I'm paying you money, right? And
Yep.
I have to see value out of that and to continue to earn my business. To me, that's a much better relationship and a speed of innovation where you can go really fast, rather than I'm going to show up to a board meeting every 6 months and hopefully you solve my problem. And 10 years from now, you're going to cut me a check. It's just, for us and how we run the business at Beck's Hybrids, I mean, it just doesn't work.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a binary set of choices either. If you are saying, look, we're going to legitimize your business and help you advance what you're doing, XYZ startup, by becoming a customer of yours, articulating our needs, articulating our strategy, what we're trying to do, helping you create products and solutions that do advance our strategy. If at some point down the road that startup catches fire, you've been an early adopter, you've been one of the
Yes.
core customers that's proven the technology, that's proven the innovation. And I suppose that opportunity for investment would always be there at a later time to participate. But I think it is a more nuanced view to say we can either participate in innovation, external innovation, through having an equity slice in the cap table, or we can have it be directly driving value to the way we service our customers today. So I like that more nuanced approach. Going back to something you said a few minutes ago, I'd like to hear a little bit more about just the blocking and tackling, maybe the bumps and bruises that come with the challenges of leading innovation within an established organization. Now, as you said, despite being around for 85 years, Beck's Hybrids is still got a significant growth trajectory. You guys are still very entrepreneurial. It's a flat, pretty lean organization.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess that it doesn't sort of protect you from that tension that exists, Brad, between leading innovation, which is inherently future focused, and because of being future focused, it dabbles in considerable uncertainty at times, while existing business lines and departments are usually operating in a manner that we're trying to hit near-term objectives. So with all that said, what has been your experience leading innovation as it relates to this long versus near-term tension, competing for resources, whether that's dollars or people or access to equipment? What have you learned in the journey thus far?
Well, my background, as I mentioned, has been in IT. I've been here for 21 years or so, and I have the gray hair to prove it now. I would say it was a difficult transition. When you go from IT, like, you get instant feedback on if what you're working on is working, if it's success or failure. I was a network engineer, so you either get a green light or you get no light. Like, you get immediate feedback. In the innovation side, I went from that to being told no, literally almost 100 times out of 100. And so the transition that I had to make was, here's what I'm being told are our goals of what we want to look at for something new. And although there were times where it was difficult for me to get a clear answer on what success looks like, I was able to figure that out through what they didn't like. It's kind of like the age old adage of, when you ask your wife where you want to go to dinner and she goes, I don't care. And you're like, we're going to go here. And she's like, oh, we're not going there. Right. So it's kind of the same dynamic as what I had experienced. So being told no a bunch right out of the gate, out of the first year, allowed me to get my focus. And so that allows you to say, okay, this stuff is off limits. Now let me solve that next problem. Okay, nope, that wasn't right. Okay, I got the feedback. This wasn't good. Okay, Now it's this. And so I was able to kind of narrow down. And at times you have to maybe have some difficult conversations, right? Of like, okay, you've told me this. And so if access to capital is the issue, and now I've solved that, and you're still saying no, help me understand how I can get to a success. So that was probably one of the most difficult periods, is just being told no over and over and over and over again, but also be encouraged that what I was seeing is the organization was maturing and going, okay, this is what success looks like. And so like the partnering model that I talked about, that was all birthed out of all the no's, right? I don't have a VC. I can't do anything. No one's going to pay attention to me. Well, that got solved, right? So I would just say those are a lot of the learnings now. Now, the blessing and the curse is that we don't have at Beck's Hybrids, as I mentioned, we're not big on bureaucracy. So like, I don't have a specific innovation framework. I don't have a spreadsheet that has a green light, red light that says, okay, if you get this amount of rate of return and this many sales, then you can go do it. So every single project that we work on is different. Every single thing we have to massage or figure out the problem that we're actually trying to solve for the business and how we can have success there. So that's kind of what I've had to do through the last couple of years. Now, what ended up happening, for example, after that first year, is the success of what we do in the innovation group here is largely reliant on the relationships that we build and the people that we meet. And so if you're looking at traditional metrics of innovation like investment, rate of return, things like that, number of new customers, that's not what I'm measured on. I'm measured on the relationships that I build and the people that I meet, because we have found that that is how I feel real innovation moves forward. And that has been a big part of our success here. So when our production team calls and says, I'm having XYZ problem, I'm like, hey, here's the 6 people that we've met, either from a startup or from a university standpoint or in an ecosystem or another, maybe it's a competitor that we know that is working in the space. We can pick up the phone and people are going to help us work through that. And because we're not necessarily traditional investors or CVCs, we're not competing for cap tables, or there's very little friction there of where people view us as a competitor.
Poorly executed mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. They can set your company back years. To defend your firm's position in the marketplace, you need access to the leading practices that unlock the greater potential of your people, processes, and systems. If you are undertaking a company transformation or pursuing an acquisition as a vehicle to grow, set up a call with Joe by visiting www.moshercg.com.
You said something here about the almost reverse engineering the no's to
Right.
figure out, learning mostly from what they didn't like, what they liked. As you look back, and this is building upon a recent conversation I had with another guest in the show, as you look back at the no's in those early days, how many of them were truly you're running up against the boundary conditions and things that were simply off limits? We're not going to pursue that. That's change that's too big. That's risk that's too large. Versus, oh, in hindsight, I probably could have communicated that differently. Like it probably was an acceptable or appealing opportunity that maybe communicated differently, we might have got a maybe versus a no. Any thoughts there?
That's a great point. And I think when we doubt ourselves, we have those conversations, right? Like, was it me? What did I do wrong? How could I do this? How could I do this better? I'll be honest with you, Joe, I keep what I call a dead dreams folder. And it's kind of an internal joke, but all those no's go into the dead dreams folder, right? Of like, and we're actually working on another project right now that has 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we got a no. It was how we put that project together. And there were bits and pieces that I was like, we are going to do this project one day. It's the wrong time. It's the wrong period in our growth structure. We need to maybe adjust some of our talent and to be able to do it, but we are going to do this project. The other thing that I'll mention is somebody one time told me, Joe, especially with farmers, we love our farmers. it cracks me up when we go to feedback sessions with farmers, because you'll literally have two guys give you opposite feedback in the same room and start fighting. But oftentimes we watch what people do, not what they say. And that doesn't mean that they're lying, right? But it just means that oftentimes I want to look at how people, the decision that they've made, what they actually do. And so, there was times where maybe we got feedback. We're like, oh, I just need a little more information. And then the next day, a major investment decision is made in the business. I'm like, okay, guys, help me understand. Like, you told me you needed more information, but yet we're making these decisions quickly. And what I found is that, risk is very different for people. So the less that you understand about a topic, the more that you in your mind view that as riskier. So a lot of what I've had to do with my Dead Dreams folder and some of these projects, Joe, is that, I have to make people feel comfortable with the topic, comfortable with the idea. We might have to say, what if this is what the future could look like? And then really watch how people react and the decisions that they make to mirror that up. Never in my wildest dreams would I think, as a network engineer, that I would have to be using a lot of soft skills and have to really work people through change. And, okay, you gave me this feedback, but then I saw this occur. Those two things in my mind don't line up. So let's see how we can work together there. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, it inspires a dozen more. So good answer.
Yeah.
Before I jump to my next thought, one thing I want to just pull through and highlight here, and this is something we've mentioned many times in the show before, but I think it bears repeating. What I'm hearing from you is we can learn from the no's. So we're not measuring our success on, did we get to yes on this particular innovation opportunity? As much as you might be in love with the idea and see only its merits and be able to explain away its risks and downsides. If you get a no, and that immediately means, okay, that was a failure, and you forfeit the opportunity to say, okay, why did we get the no? Did we just go too far afield of what's acceptable and tolerable and within scope of our charter? Was it a failure to communicate effectively? Was it a failure to bring the people along to make sure they understood it, such that the perceived risk was reduced to a manageable level? If you don't do that, I think you limit kind of the benefits you get from getting to even the point of proposing the innovation. It's kind of like a sales call with a new prospect, a first-time customer, meeting somebody at a conference, whatever it might be. If you're in a sales or business development role, if you treat every conversation as, was it a success or a failure based on, did I walk away with a contract after talking to them? That's a pretty myopic view of your relationship with the marketplace. And sometimes a no is just a not now. Sometimes the no is a not yet, right? And there's things to be learned. And so I think whether you're leading innovation, in the case of Beck's Hybrid, whether you're an independent agronomic advisor trying to build a book of business within your tri-county area, whether you're a grain merchant trying to originate bushels in adjacent territory we've historically not competed, we need to take a longer term view on relationship building, the people you meet, because yes, that first conversation might not actually put anything into the P&L, but it doesn't mean it won't in the future. But I digress. That's just something I heard that I wanted to call through or pull through.
Well, and through all those no's too, what it did was it helped me be able, as a leader within my organization here, like, it also helps me in my leadership capabilities. It helps me shepherd people. So, we have a lot of people within the organization that comes to us and goes, hey, I have this idea. And through all those no's helps me say, okay, here's what success might look like in the boardroom. Here's what is of interest. So through that was able to gain, maybe confidence is the right word, right? Like the confidence to sit down and have a conversation with people and feel that I'm helping them refine their idea and get to what success looks like.
So something else that occurred to me in your prior answer, Brad, was there's this concept of affectionately sometimes referred to as managing up and trying to help coach or coaching up, perhaps. And I don't know, maybe this has happened, maybe it hasn't, but in those early days and kind of that taking those first early licks and hearing a lot of no's, a nearly 100% rate of no, did you also observe that sometimes what the organization's explicit stated intents or what they wanted to accomplish was actually falling down once it was confronted with an opportunity to do something in service of it? Because sometimes there is actually this point of friction where an organization, a board, an executive team, ownership, whoever it might be, might say, we are trying to accomplish XYZ. And when a brave member of management brings forward a big, bold opportunity that actually will push the organization in that direction, the reality of the change, the level of the risk, the amount of the sacrifice comes into stark focus all of a sudden for the first time. And the instinctual response is, no, we can't do that, even though that's exactly what they've signaled to the organization that they want you to do. I'm not asking you if that has happened at Beck's, but I'm wondering, was there times too where you've had to maybe coach up and help folks understand that if these are actually our objectives as an organization from an innovation perspective, we need to adjust our risk appetite accordingly? Or did you see that these kind of flanged up pretty good early on?
Well, so I think that probably a lot of people in the innovation space have had that happen, what you just talked about, Joe. There is I think at times there are the talking points that when we're faced with reality can get a little scary, or maybe the implementation pain that it takes to get there, especially in ag, when especially if you're in the row crop space, we're dealing with one sales cycle per year. So there are things where it's like, hey, we can do this. It might take 2 years, but let me tell you what the first year of this is going to look like. And sometimes they don't like reality there, right? So I think being honest about what the problem that you're trying to solve, and then also what the change that's going to happen within the organization as well. If you've read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, he has some great advice in there. And, there are times you have to kind of say the quiet part out loud. And what I have found oftentimes in meetings is that I tend to try to now be that voice of reason and say the quiet part out loud. So, for example, starting something out and saying, hey, I know you guys might not like this. This is going to cause the organization a lot of pain. In order to achieve your objective A, here are some things that we think would have to change. And this is going to change how our people show up. This is going to change roles. This is going to complicate, X, Y, Z. And it's going to take 12 to 15 months to properly execute this. So running through that so that you're preparing them for this is major. Let's also acknowledge that there's going to be, maybe some challenges, and we're going to have a communications plan. We're going to have a talent plan. We're going to have a capital plan. And then here's when everything's going to come together. A lot of times you just have to say that out loud and acknowledge it and give them the ability to correct you, right? And because sometimes I've been in those situations like, yep, we understand that. We're on board. Let's go. And then sometimes it's like, oh man, I didn't realize that, or I wasn't thinking that it would affect this department in this way. Maybe a better way to describe that, Joe, is like being honest on when you're trying to think big picture, sometimes the details can get lost. And so being able in our minds, sometimes when you're only focused on the output and you're not focused on how we're going to get there, those details can get lost. And that's where the collateral damage happens, right? That's when department managers get upset that they weren't included, or one person's taking all the critical feedback. And, so I think being very honest in the organization about here's how we're going to do, here's where we're going. We've thought about these things. We're aware of them when we have a plan to mitigate them. Oftentimes maybe helps in those sorts of conversations there. But I think that it's kind of like sometimes when you sit down with startup companies and they have this hockey stick of income, I'm going to sell one widget today and 10,000 next year. And they're like, wait a minute, there's a whole lot of detail here that you missed. And how in the world are you going to pull that off? It's the same thing internally, right? And when you're selling a vision of okay, this isn't going to magically snap together. And then there's going to be pain and there's going to be problems. And here's how we're going to address those and deal with those.
Well, that circles back to something you said earlier very nice. I mean, this idea of, I'm going to call it admitting and then owning the pain that this will incur, right?
Right.
So
because if it was easy, we would have already done it, right?
Yeah, or everybody else would have, and you'd be following them, right? So if you admit and own the likely pain, or not even owning it, but pointing to. So one, that requires you to have a very comprehensive understanding of the execution requirements, of actually thinking about that broadly, not just thinking about how do we get this product in front of a customer, how do we get this project done? It's what is it going to organizationally require in terms of product development, manufacturing, distribution, support, reverse logistics for either return, whatever it might be. But to have that comprehensive understanding, you also need to you have to have that thorough inventory of what's required. If you do all that, kind of back to our earlier conversation of bringing your stakeholders along making sure that they understand what it is you're proposing. Because if they understand, that'll moderate their perception of the risk. Now, in this case, you're actually doing risk articulation. You're showing in high def, here's how hard it's going to be. But you're almost chasing the ambiguity out of the plan and saying, okay, look, here's what it is. And so I wonder if that doesn't actually make it easier for leadership to say yes to really hard things when you do that work for them up front.
Well, and part of it too is having my group here. We're sometimes like, we're the shield, right? So like, if this is too radical, instead of the department coming forth and saying, we want to do this, let us help put that together. Let me de-risk it. And if it just falls on its face, hey, I'm here to take the beating. If this is successful, this is all the department's success, right? So sometimes people just need that comfort. The other important thing that I talked about earlier is, since I've been in this organization for a long time, the relationships is very, very key, Joe. Because like, stuff's going to go wrong, right? Something is going to go wrong at some point in the project. How you handle that as an organization will dictate the success of it. I mean, there is probably not a month that goes by that I walk into some office somewhere and go, hey, I screwed up. Like, I need some grace here. Here's what happened. How do we work through this and get to a better outcome? So a lot of proposals and projects, like, we all have, it's unicorns and rainbows, right? But when you're down in the dirt and crap hits the fan, at the end of the day, it's those relationships where you can humbly walk into somebody's office and go, how can I help you solve this problem? Or how can I step in front of this train for you? Or, hey, we need to talk about what happened here. Like, those are going to be key, because how we handle those, I think, as an organization tells the level of comfort that your organization has with change and how you handle it. And I mean, none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. And again, how we handle that conflict and when things go wrong is oftentimes a direct reflection of how many things go right.
Yeah, wonderful. So continuing this, the messy middle of innovation, kind of the middleware you were talking about, and kind of operating across all these different stakeholder groups and the ways that it shows up. If I was to ask a managing partner of an agriculturally focused private equity fund, or a partner in a venture capital fund that's investing in agribusiness, and I said, okay, what is it that's going to set a founder or a founding team apart in terms of where they're likely to, what are the things that they're doing that make them likely to win, right? What are the markers that tell you that they're onto something that's both novel and compelling, and they have better than average odds of actually getting it done? They would probably give me one set of answers. You guys have taken this different approach where you're actually saying, look, we're going to invest by being partners with you, by being your customer, by adopting, testing, providing feedback on and iterating your product or solutions such that you actually create a better product and get a better business over time. In your role in these external partnerships and the concierge support that you provide to startups within the ag space, what do you see as the markers that a founder and their team are onto something novel and compelling, but that they can also get the job done? Because it's more than what's on the pitch deck. It's actually, how do they build, ship product, and support the customers? What do you look to as the short list of, this tells me that we're onto something?
Yeah. So something often tells us internally, like, we need to hire employees that are self-motivated, are going to show up every day and work hard. Like, I can teach you all the rest of the crap, but I can't teach you to be passionate about what you do, and then show up and just kill it. And I think the number one thing that is very, very evident as we work with startup companies, you can't fake passion. And people that are passionate tend to work hard and want to solve problems. And you can be, well, I think we've all had people that we've interacted with that you're like, hey, they're smart, or they work for a successful company. But then you meet maybe another person, you're like, that person is like infatuated with solving these problems or is in these businesses. And like, those are the people that we tend to gravitate towards. I often find out, since we don't have it in an investment arm, like, the people that we work best with, most of the time, checkbooks never come out until the end, right? And it's like, hey, I have this problem. Oh man, we could do this, and I've got this. And, it's instantly into problem solving mode. And that sort of like passionate problem solving stuff, you cannot fake that. I think that's you call it charm, charisma. I don't know what. There's probably a fancy word for it, but like you cannot fake the passion that people have in their business. And to me, we want to work. We're all passionate here about what we do, and we tend to work really well with those folks. So pitch decks are pitch decks. Like the other thing is that we've really appreciated is we've also met some founders and groups that are solving a problem, and it's always fun to come alongside them and go, hey, have you ever thought about being a row crop ag? And they're like, why would we do that? And I'm like what you're doing here could directly affect my business. And so helping them to think broader. When you do that, normally you're either flipping a switch and then you get the email at 2:00 in the morning from the founder, right? Like, hey, I couldn't sleep last night. I was thinking about this problem, blah, 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 blah. Like you cannot fake that. Those tend to be the people that I want to do business with and that I want to work with and that we get to do really good things with.
So it's not going to be the financial model. It's not going to be the menu of features.
No, I mean,
it is
financial models are mostly just worth the paper that they're written on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I always tell people all the time, like contracts are only there if you're willing to sue somebody else. And yeah. If you're solving a problem for me, like we can work through that stuff. And most of the time, if everybody is getting value out of the relationship, like it doesn't have to be straight money. To your point, it could be access. It could be, I mean, we're running a robotics project in field right now with a company this summer where, in 3 days, we did 3 major model reiterations in 3 days. Like some other companies that would have taken 6 months or a year. We did 3 in 3 days. And it was because we had direct access to the people. Our team and their team are basically embedded into one another. We're working fast. We're solving problems. Like those are the people that you're like, man, I love working with these folks. And so sometimes the relationships that we have with them are, yes, there's money at the end of the day, but that's not everybody walks away going, I won. Like to me, that's perfect. Nobody feels that no one's even been taking advantage of, well, hey, we got our money and we're getting out of this deal as fast as we can. That's not success. And especially in the ag community, I mean, the older that I get, the smaller this community is. And so there will come a time where people change jobs or work for somewhere else and you're going to have to work with them so you don't burn any bridges. But you cannot replace that passion that people have.
Yeah. One of the reasons, ironically, Brad, that was such a joy to meet you here earlier this summer and have the chance to talk today is, I mean, you have clear passion for what you all are doing at Beck's. You have a lot of passion for finding a way to stand up the innovation organization, if you will, or the effort, and then to similarly the passion to and the willingness to share and give back to others along the ag supply chain. I think anybody that's listening that is, whether standing up a new department in an organization derived from a strategic initiative that's been set forth by the board, whether you are just driving a large transformation project within your organization, whether you actually are a director of innovation, newly assigned, and maybe innovations even somewhat vaguely defined within your organization. I think there's a lot here for people. And so I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Is there anything else that you would like to share or coach or guide other folks that are maybe early in this journey and what they need to be thinking about?
Well, I'm very humbled to be on your podcast. So thank you very much for the opportunity. The other idea I think that we get often is I get a lot of people that are like, hey, I have an idea, or hey, I think we should do this, or hey, I think that we should do that. The coaching that I have given a lot of people when they come and sit down in my office is, you listen to every single idea. Like, okay, great. Are you willing to quit your job and tackle that idea full time and work on that idea, deal with the ups, the downs, and do that? And if their answer is no, then I normally thank them for their time, right? And we move on. If the answer is yes, you jump on those ideas and you help coach those people in that, right? It goes back to that passionate thing. The ideas are cheap sort of thing, but if you have passionate people that are passionate about that problem, I want to support those people within our organization. Now, that can be scary based on our earlier conversation, right, Joe? That can be super duper scary of, oh my word, this person is a direct contributor into XYZ. What are we going to do if we pull them out and do this? But if they're passionate about it, want to solve that problem, they'll be happier. The organization will be resilient and it'll be a good thing. So I love to help support people within our organization that want to tackle those kinds of problems. But if you're literally not willing to quit your job, and that's kind of taking it to the extreme, but it puts it into perspective of, if you want to intimately solve that problem, I will be here to give you every resource that you need to help do that. Otherwise, it's just another idea.
Well, I think it's a reflection of a shared willingness to take those risks, which is derived from a shared conviction that it's a risk worth taking, or that it's the reward, the opportunity, the value to be created is greater than the potential downsides of it going sideways. And so,
Sure.
No, that's wonderful. Well, Brad, thank you again for taking the time to join us. I'll make sure we have links, of course, to Beck's, but also to yourself on LinkedIn for folks who might want to get in touch and continue the conversation. And I just appreciate you being part of it.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you as always for tuning into today's episode. I hope that you found something not just of interest, but of actionable value in our conversation today. And if you did, please consider sharing this episode with someone that you think would find similar benefit. It's the very best way you can support the show and help us elevate thinking around strategy execution across the ag supply chain. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to having you again right here on the Pacesetter Pod.